Hello, welcome to Divorce Periscope. My name's Matt Pilisher, and I'm here with Ruth Feinblum, and we're going to be here talking about divorce and wellness. So, preserving your wellness through this very difficult process. We're going to give it a few minutes for people to tune in, and then we'll get started. So, sit tight, and we'll get started in a little while. Thanks for the hearts.
What's going on?
People can tune in and, we lost some connection.
Okay.
And so there's 4 people watching. Hello,
That's
4
fun.
people.
Hi, people.
And they can tap
Oh,
to
that's
say
cute.
they like something.
Very cool.
We have a first-time Periscoper here.
Hello.
And we're broadcasting from Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, in case you're interested or you found us on the map.
An unbelievably cute little town.
Yeah.
I really like Jenkintown. If I ever moved to the suburbs, I would consider Jenkintown.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I grew up here, and I never thought I would be back, but life winds in strange and mysterious ways.
Indeed,
and it's
it
a
does.
good place to raise a family, as cliche as that is to say. And I'm back here raising a family.
Yeah.
Hi, McCarthy Law. Glad that it notified you that we're live. Yeah.
I missed a question coming in by the
Oh, I got it. It was a comment.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We have Matt Piccirilli here doing audio, video, and behind the scenes work. So thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
You're only as good as your behind the scenes work.
It's true.
You really are. It's like the stage manager makes the show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So should we give it another minute and then get started? Okay. Somebody invited somebody. That's good. This signal keeps kind of going in and out, so I might miss some things.
Okay.
So
We've got some lovely artwork behind this, too.
To speak from behind the scenes, I should say that any guest who is watching can invite people or share the broadcast that is happening now. If you have anybody in mind who would like to be tuning in, search for @AlphaDivorce.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about.
And Alpha's mission is very wellness, it feels like to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like very holistic.
Yeah, getting you through a horrible time in your life as peaceful as possible so that you don't forget anything, taking care of yourself, your kids, your family moving forward. Yeah.
It feels like sort of the role of an anesthesiologist or something. Like if you have to, we sort of likened it to an amputation prior to the podcast. And if you have to do it, have the right doctors, have the right medicine as painless as possible, because it's a pretty horrifying thing.
Right.
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard. Horrifying is a strong word. Hard. Really hard thing.
Mm-hmm. Even if it's amicable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will officially get started. Welcome to Divorce Periscope. We're here the first and third Wednesday of every month from 7 to 8-ish at Alpha Divorce. And we are the Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation that's hosting this show. And I'm Matt Pilisher. I'm an attorney and a mediator with Alpha Center. So I kind of am people's guide throughout their journey going through this holistic divorce process. We have attorneys, accountants, therapists to help with co-parenting if you have kids, and we have financial counselors. And we've been doing this We pioneered divorce mediation in this area. We've been doing it 20 years. We just had our 20th anniversary party this past Saturday, which was really fun.
That's cool.
Sorry you couldn't be there.
I was sorry too.
So we also do a lot of community education, and a lot of our model is about educating our clients. So I think a lot of the fear and anxiety that comes through it is what's next. You don't know what the legal process is like. You're on shaky ground. So we try and provide as much stability at every step of the way. And so this is a part of our community education, this divorce periscope. And we're switching between different topics related to divorce and marriage. So tonight we're talking about wellness, keeping yourself well. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments or tap some hearts out for us. If you have anything, if you're interested in questions about relationships, marriage, divorce, but we're basically focusing on divorce and focusing on your wellness as you're going through this very difficult process. So we're happy to have Ruth here, Ruth Feinblum,
I'm really
with us.
happy to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Awesome. Ruth is a therapist, so let me just introduce you and then you can add whatever you want after that. Ruth practices in Center City, Philly, and she's been doing private practice of therapy since 2008 in Philly. What drew her to be a therapist was the desire to help people who felt stuck in some aspect of their lives. She was first inspired to be a therapist by a childhood family therapist that helped her family through a very difficult time in her life when her mom died of cancer. And I was going to tell you, my mom died of cancer too.
Mm. That's another hard one.
That's another hard one. Yeah.
Hard.
Death and divorce. Well, they say divorce is a lot like death.
Yeah.
So after many years in the field of therapy, Ruth chose to specialize in helping people struggling with anxiety, struggling with their relationships, or coping with divorce. Some of the couples she works with continue their marriage, and some decide to peacefully as possible end it. Ruth has a master's in social service from Bryn Mawr College and an undergrad degree in psychology. She holds a license in clinical social work and a postmaster's certificate in cognitive behavioral therapy from Bryn Mawr College. She also worked in public mental health system for 7 years prior to founding Growth Solutions Counseling in Philly. Oh, so you've been in private practice since 2008, but before that you were 7 years in
public mental health.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit pre-masters and then post-masters, yeah.
Okay.
So that was the job I did in this area, yeah.
So anything else you want to share with people about your background?
I think I came into the work with divorcing couples through partially personal experience, of course, and then also I'd work with some couples and they wouldn't make it. And I think that's a place sometimes that it can almost, the therapy process with the couples therapist can stop. And when there's children, there's a whole other journey. Even when there isn't children, there's a whole other journey. And so sort of a couple things in my life pointed me to doing this work with people, and some reading and some supervision and some soul searching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So welcome to all the people that are here. We're talking about divorce and wellness, taking care of yourself as you go through this process. So if you want to ask any questions or comments, please feel free. So stress and divorce, it may be obvious, but this is one of the most stressful times in a person's life. We just said it's like death.
It's like death.
And it's like amputation is another metaphor or simile we came up with.
And sometimes it's a rebirth, but...
Hopefully it's a rebirth.
Yeah.
Right?
But there's some really intense and difficult emotions involved.
Yeah. So can you talk about, before we are, relieving the stress, or what are some things you can do, how does stress impact your body and mind? I guess especially if as someone that's going through the divorce process, you're trying to make major decisions, you're trying to keep your cool, hopefully, but stress can really sort of make you out of your mind and unhealthy, right?
Pretty literally, because stress is really your fight-flight response. And during fight or flight, you have, fight or flight was designed to help us run away from bears in the woods. And so trying to go through a complex emotional and legal and financial and co-parenting process while, having tunnel vision and literally, because in fight or flight, you literally really can't hear. You're really not in the front of your brain, which is the problem-solving part of your brain. So it's pretty difficult. If people stay stuck there could be a lot of health problems, many of which are known: heart issues, stomach problems, ulcers. The emotional effects are awful: anxiety, depression. And then out of that, you sort of can wind up in some pretty bad behaviors that can lead back into other health problems: overeating, smoking, drinking, illegal drugs, just socially isolating and not taking care of yourself. So the stress of a divorce cannot be underestimated. It is like a death. And it is a death of sorts.
So that's sort of what you're up against when you're going through this transition. So what are some ways that people can try to lower their stress, try and at least be present about the fact that they have stress? And so I guess you need to recognize the problem before you can try and solve it. But what are some tips for trying to preserve your well-being through a divorce process?
Part of it is being okay with the fact that it's going to be a little hard, and almost not panicking about the fact that it's hard and being calm about the fact that this is very difficult. And that's cultivating something that's called equanimity, which, if you have an ongoing meditation process, that's really what one gains from that. It's learning to be less reactive about negative emotions. So you want to do everything you can to stay as grounded as possible. Meditating helps. Any sort of a relaxation process helps. That could be some sort of a class that helps you to relax. That could be a yoga class. That could be a good massage. Therapy helps. Both individual therapy, where you sort of look at what fears you have out of the divorce. What are you afraid of? What does it mean to you about yourself? What is it? Are you thinking of yourself as a failure? Are you thinking of yourself as your life's never going to be the same again, or you're never going to be happy, or you're never going to be able to cope? Can you learn to realize that, hey, you're not a failure. This thing didn't work out, but it's not you. You are going to be able to cope. It just may be difficult a little bit at moments. So that's the piece individual therapy can address. A support group is invaluable at this moment. Be around other people that are going through the same thing. Because even if your friends are divorced, they're not divorcing now.
Right.
And also, you're just going to have a big empty space in your life.
Do you know some support groups? Do you run any support groups?
I don't currently, because I'm doing some teaching this year, and in the first year of teaching I wasn't able to, so ideally I'll be able to restart that. Okay. Unfortunately, the woman that I loved on the main line that I always referred to is not doing them either. But there's something called divorce cares.
Oh, yeah.
And I get, I have a client or two that are going that are really happy about that. So divorce cares is all around. But yeah, support group is key. Don't go through this one alone, and you're going to have all this empty time in your life. So getting people around that can really understand and are compassionate, really important. Gather your friends around. Really come up with a structured plan of who your supports are. And and just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself as if you're physically ill.
Right.
Because it's that intense.
We didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'm thinking about this gathering, circling the wagons and gathering the friends that would help you most. And is it okay that going through this time, you sort of also put a hand's distance to some relationships that maybe aren't as supportive for you? I'm trying to think about, if you have friends that aren't going to be the best influence, or that they're going to badmouth your spouse and you don't want to have that hopefully the friends we have aren't going to do that. But like, how do you do that? Is it okay to tell some people I need some space during this process?
I think it's always okay to state your needs and set limits in a calm, assertive manner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've seen couples really set the tone, and I think that helps them protect themselves. So Amy Poehler writes about this a little bit in her book, and like some people are going to be wonderful friends, and it turns out some friends will fall by the wayside because they won't be able to cope with the change in status, or they'll have their own reaction or opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And it is best to set limits and not really engage in bad-mouthing your spouse. If they couldn't be it, they couldn't be it.
Mm-hmm.
I would never advocate for staying with a spouse that doesn't fit. But also engaging in a lot of negative and angry thinking beyond a point can really circle and leave you stuck in the marriage and stuck in the unhappiness. So yeah, getting into bad mouthing and bashing, we're the first beneficiary of our negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm harboring anger at my spouse, my ex-spouse, as a person, that's sort of affecting me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anger's evolutionary function is to protect us. Use your anger to help you get out the door and realize that this isn't working, but probably also work on really finding a way to then release it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, set limits with people that are going to feed anger, set limits with people that don't know how to be supportive, set limits with people that just don't feel comforting at that point. It's okay to take distance.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice.
Protect yourself a little bit, yeah.
Welcome Suzanne34 and everyone else who joined us. We're doing Divorce Periscope, so we do this the first and third Wednesdays of every month from about 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We do different topics as they relate to going through divorce. This is hosted by Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation at Alpha Divorce. So we're talking about wellness and divorce. How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your family, your relationships as you're going through this very stressful process of divorce? If you have questions or comments, please feel free to type them in and share them with us. So let me pick up on the decision to divorce, which is also something that we didn't talk about beforehand. But
Yeah.
You said a certain amount of preserving your own wellness is recognizing when a relationship is toxic. You didn't use that word, but if a relationship is toxic...
I go with not serving you.
Not serving you.
Right?
It may be that you find yourself behaving in ways you don't want to behave, not just that the other person is like a horrible person.
By the end of the relationship, usually both people are pretty unhappy with themselves too. It gets into this negative interaction that it doesn't pull out our better side.
Yeah. So I guess I was thinking about the balance of wellness where you're trying to preserve a relationship or preserve a marriage versus the balance of this is never going to be as well as it needs to be, and to preserve our own individual wellnesses, we need to part. I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I mean, that's part of what you actually help people
That's
do,
a
right?
big decision point I help people walk through.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
I mean, partially people part when they think it's not an interaction or a situation, but it's who the person is. I think part of a marriage is learning what your limits are. And maybe you're in a partnership with somebody that just can't give you what is best for you.
Mm-hmm.
The happiness research shows that the happiest people are happily married. In the middle are single people. But the unhappiest people, and actually the least, and connected to that is less physical wellness, are unhappily married. So the ripple effects of an unhappy marriage are pretty serious, and they're pretty serious for children as well. You sort of have to look at who you are, what you're hoping for out of a marriage, and if that person really fits with that or is capable of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they can, and that's okay. And sometimes you can't, and that's okay. I don't see bad, evil people in my therapy room that are just mean and nasty. I see people that really can't meet each other's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I see hurt and I see sadness. That's a hard way to go through life. We do have an option. We don't stay with the first house usually. We don't stay in the first job usually. We don't
Mm-hmm.
stay in the first career a lot of times. Life is trial and error.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's okay if you didn't know what you needed the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think they have to look at, is this who the person is? Or is it an interaction between us? And what am I bringing to this interaction?
Mm-hmm.
What am I adding to this? Can I take care of my part of it? Can I change my part of the interaction?
Mm-hmm. And when you're working with people making this decision, is it individually and you work with couples together?
It
Both?
can go either way.
Yeah.
Because it can come in as couples therapy,
Uh-huh.
but it may be that they're not going to meet each other's needs.
Mm-hmm.
But they could come in individually too.
Mhm.
So either or.
Mm-hmm. So
We're kind of weaving in and out
we
of the
got
questions.
a lot
That's
of
okay.
good,
We're gonna get
we
it.
got a lot of good topics
We're gonna get
here.
it. Yeah.
Thank you for that comment. Beautifully said. So we have some interesting things here. I want to jump to, in your experience, do men and women take care of themselves differently during divorce?
Yeah, I thought that was a good question actually, and I sort of, I took a little time with the questions earlier today. The thing is, we don't always teach little boys what we teach little girls about how to take care of themselves, and so I see my men as more isolated, and that leaves them ripe for sort of jumping into a next relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that next relationship is a great idea, but sometimes it's not. So I see my men as feeling as many feelings and being as upset, but not always having the social support around, not always having the language. I mean, more and more we're comprehending that men have emotional lives and we're accepting of that as a society, but like some of my older guys are having a pretty bad time of it. And that's not socially acceptable to them. So in that way, it's much harder.
Mm-hmm. I think even my age, I'm 37, and I was divorced, and I am a pretty sensitive guy, but I think what a lot of men commonly feel, which is shame that the marriage was a failure, and I've heard that that's common, and is that sort of a more male perspective, or do women also sort of take that as a main takeaway of divorce?
Yeah. I'm a failure is a pretty common thought for both genders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
I think the women sometimes, on average, are more comfortable saying that to a girlfriend who then says,
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think my guys
Isolated again.
can isolate. I mean, I think men's friendships, and Dr. Robert Garfield out on the main line, just wrote a book, and there's a lot of strength to men's friendships.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's harder for men to talk about that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of failure. And I think we get a message from society that you're supposed to make it in your first marriage. And of course we would want that for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anybody to ever have to go through a divorce. They're really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But more than on other fronts, an expectation that you make it work, and if you don't make it work, that it's a failing in you.
Right.
And I think there's serious long-term effects for staying in an unhappy marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people that let go, if they can do it in a peaceful way, really get to a better place with each other,
Mm-hmm.
actually start to like each other again.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be married, but they like each other, co-parent more effectively, and have happier lives.
I've seen that for
I've
sure.
seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what about kids then? Obviously kids are impacted.
Oh, yeah.
So what are some ways to lessen the stress and anxiety that's in the household, that's in the family, and to lessen the impact on the kids?
So what affects children is tension, is anger, is unpredictability. And what affects children is being in the middle or thinking that they have to love. If they love mom, they can't love dad. If they love dad, they can't love mom, or mom, or dad and dad, whatever the scenario is. But what helps kids is if parents cannot involve children in the process. If they can keep the anger and animosity and tension away from the children, if they can give the child permission to love the other parent, not badmouth, if they can divorce with dignity, they're modeling grace under fire for their children. And they're modeling maturity, and they're modeling like, it's okay for me to prioritize myself, but also you're a really big priority. Our children only get one childhood. They didn't ask for any of this. And I think we have to, in a divorce process, do everything humanly possible to protect them, because the effects of an angry divorce are serious. Serious and long-lasting. I have adults that come to see me that can't plan their wedding because their parents didn't get over the divorce, or their children's birthday parties. And they didn't ask for any of that. So we've got to protect them.
We'll be talking much more in depth about that on our next show. 3/16, March 16th, the topic is going to be children and divorce. So if you are interested in that, to tune in 7 o'clock on March 16th. Welcome if you're just joining us to Divorce Periscope. We're talking about all things divorce, although this session we're focusing on wellness, taking care of yourself through this tough process. And we're happy to have Ruth Feinblum here, who's a therapist, to talk with us. Sometimes with newfound freedom of a separated person going through divorce, they may decide taking care of oneself means jumping right back into a relationship or into bed with other people. Can you talk about that?
I just made a face, so my thoughts are a little clear on that one. I think, like, what's ready for a new relationship? Like, that's something that's a little amorphous and hard to define. So the fear with jumping into another relationship is the same fear with any potentially destructive behavior, which is sort of not doing it for the right reasons and also harming another person in the process. So it's hard. We can't run from sadness. Sometimes we have to sit with it and go through it to move beyond it. Sort of using that death analogy, right? Like, stages are like, the first one's denial, then it's anger, then it's, the last one is acceptance. I think there's a danger of not knowing what your part of the equation was in the first marriage. There's a danger of accepting a relationship that isn't a good relationship in the long run, one that will really truly support. And I think it can be an avoidance of negative emotions. And unfortunately, when we try to, avoid negative emotions, they seem to come back full force. There's something about pushing them away that almost makes them come back with more intensity. So I think when somebody is sort of clear on what they wish they'd done differently in the first relationship, what they need in the next relationship, and they've given themselves some time and sort of rebuilt their life outside of the relationship, it can be a safe choice. But I'd be really cautious.
If you want to type in any questions or comments, we have Matt Piccarelli behind the scenes who can keep track of good questions and comments that I may miss as we're talking. So let me ask you, Ruth, to go a little bit deeper, because I know you have on your website mindfulness as one of the things you help, and you were just talking about that, like you need to actually be there with the pain and the suffering a little bit to make sure you can learn from it. Yeah. So I think mindfulness is a term that's becoming more and more
Diluted
accepted.
or something.
Well,
Oh yeah, okay,
people,
accepted, true.
accepted. People know generally what it means.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more diluted, but it's not just sort of a fringe term anymore. People are sort of really trying to figure out how to be present in a lot of. I mean, because we're all running around so much in our lives, and it feels like, oh, the day's over and I didn't even experience any of it. With a negative emotions being thrown at you through the divorce process, I'm sure even more you're like, let me just
get away
not
from
be
those
here.
feelings.
Right. So
Understandably.
so when you mean mindfulness, what does that mean, and how do you help people with that?
So mindfulness is really the art of being present. It's not being in the past, it's not being in the future. It's not clinging to your thoughts. It's letting thoughts be thoughts. Thoughts have a relationship to reality, but they're not reality. And so if my thought out of the divorce is, I am a failure, I'm certainly sad about the divorce and I certainly don't like the way that it's going, or life is going at that moment. I'm at one of those turning points, but I'm not actually a failure. So it's staying present and letting yourself experience things, even hard things. I think with mindfulness practices, people can experience relaxation in the short run, and that's a wonderful effect of meditating or body-mind practices. I think in the long run, the goal is equanimity, staying calm with difficult experiences.
Mm-hmm. And so some people may sort of take that as being passive.
Yeah, it's not passive, but it could come across that way. Mm-hmm. Totally. Acceptance is another thing that can sort of come off as passivity. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's inactive. I think there's the experience and there's our thoughts about the experience. Mm-hmm. And it's saying, those are my failure thoughts again.
Mm-hmm. And they sometimes just replay and replay and replay.
Yeah. And it's finding a way to disengage from the loop. Mm-hmm. I think our thoughts are just thoughts, and they have valuable information, but they're not the whole truth and nothing but the truth either.
So if someone was watching this and they're having that, like, I'm a failure, or I can't believe I'm doing this to my kids,
Yeah.
What would you say, what can they do right now to try and stop themselves from keeping hitting that wall?
So cognitive therapy would help with the content of the thought, and so a strong therapist, cognitive or no, is always helpful. There's multiple meditation resources online. Tara Brach has tons of free stuff on her website. There's a therapist in Iowa that put up the whole mindfulness-based stress reduction class online for free. But I can list you 4 places in Philadelphia that do this class, and 2 of them are extremely affordable, which is Council for Relationships and the Mazzoni Center. They both have mindfulness-based stress reduction, and inexpensively so. Oh, yeah. Totally. And Penn and Jefferson both have classes as well. So you can go take an in-person class, but you can work your way through an online class. Or you could go to Tara Brach's website and just start watching her videos and just get a feel for it. Like, that's okay. There's a ton of books out there, and a lot of them are really strong. Jack Kornfield is another person that's really strong in this area that's published. There's resources out there. So I think it's rough to try to cultivate mindfulness. It's sort of like trying to learn to play piano in the middle of a thunderstorm, only you're out in the storm, you're not in the house. So you may want to use it more as a relaxation technique in the short run and just feel a little teeny tiny bit of relief from those huge waves of negative emotion.
Right, because I guess the idea of mindfulness or meditation is that you're practicing it so that when you come upon a really tough time, you can use it. So it's tough to just be learning it in the middle of the storm, is what you're saying.
And it's not that you can't do it, you know. Yeah, it's not that you can't do it. But it's ideal to have a set of tools ahead of time. We don't all. Sometimes we wind up in life's thornier situations and we are out in the thunderstorm and we're just trying to play an instrument, and we got to figure that out, you know?
So We're talking about wellness and divorce with Ruth Feinblum, who's a therapist that works in this field. And I'm an attorney and a mediator that works in the field of divorce. This is hosted by Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation. So we try and get you through the divorce in the most peaceful, holistic way possible.
I've had a couple clients that went through Alpha, and one was definitely with you, and they were really pleased. They felt like it was a really good process.
Good.
Yeah.
So, when you're going through a divorce and you're trying to shield yourself from the negative emotions, we talked about one negative behavior could be jumping into relationships that you're not ready for yet. Other negative behaviors you mentioned briefly: drugs,
alcohol, overeating,
right?
social isolation.
If you feel yourself going down that road, what do you think are the ways to sort of steer yourself away from that?
I'd find a strong therapist, I'd find a strong support group, and I'd probably in some way get myself into, if this is your kind of thing, yoga or some sort of a meditative process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to really have as many umbrellas as possible. It's still going to be rainy, it's going to be a little wet and a little cold, but to shield yourself and really bring supports around you.
Let me get back to the falling into becoming passive as a mistake for being peaceful, because I've also, part of being a neutral mediator, when I'm a neutral mediator working with two spouses
who are pretty unhappy.
You
really have to ground yourself and actively use sort of some mindfulness to stay calm.
Yeah, well, for sure.
Because they're really upset.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get engaged and feel all their upset.
But sometimes one spouse is going to say, I'm going to be the peaceful one, so I'm just going to say yes to everything.
Yeah,
which is also a mistake.
Yeah, it is.
So I see that sometimes, and the best you can do is bring it up, saying, are you sure that's what you want? There's been lots of compromises on your part. I just want to, recognize that. And so I think
that's a good one.
It's tough to sort of veer into feeling like you're just going to make this as peaceful as possible, but you're giving up. You're not thinking about yourself and your future.
Gandhi was peaceful, but he wasn't passive.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
So that's where some skills in assertiveness, and really there's a non-aggressive way to state your needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be so peaceful. And we don't want somebody to give up too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really hard process. People are flooded. They are in fight or flight, and they want it over. And you can't fault them for that, But yeah, that can lead someone to giving up too much, especially if they've had a really tough spouse.
Yeah.
And they're just exhausted.
Definitely. And hopefully they're working with the right people. Like through our program, we try and address that, and we have an ample time for them to work with multiple professionals as they're going through the program. And if they're working with a therapist, hopefully they're working on that. But I'm thinking of people who are going through divorce and all they have is a divorce litigator, Yeah,
that's rough. And a divorce litigator can really pump up the anger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, lawyers are trained to fight for things. That's great. We need that in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think this process isn't served well by that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and there's a risk for a passive person to get with an aggressive litigator, and that can really wind up with legal fees that are astronomical. I have heard of astounding amounts of money spent on legal fees, 6 figures easily on legal fees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a lot, and that's your future, and that's, your child's education,
So I think my last question, and then I want to ask you if there's any other things you want to bring up and talk about, or explain your own practice and how you work with people through the process of divorce. Can you talk about self-compassion? So we already talked about mindfulness a little bit, but I think that was also on your website, self-compassion.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and how are some ways that people can be doing that in this time period of their life?
So it's interesting because the self-compassion piece can almost get to a passivity too. Self-compassion is being as nice to yourself as you would be to somebody else. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times we try to motivate ourselves with angry statements in our own head. Oh, you shouldn't have done that. That was so stupid. Why can't you do that? You should be able to do this. What's your problem? And it turns out that when I feel attacked, I am less motivated. And when we attack ourselves, we're less motivated. And so it's how can you be gentle and encouraging with yourself? Mm-hmm. If your best friend was getting divorced, you wouldn't say, oh, you're stupid, you should have known better. Why did you let yourself get into that relationship? You'd say, hey, this sucks. I know you're hurting. Look, it's okay. We all make mistakes. You'll learn from this. You're going to heal from this. Mm-hmm. It's being gentle and encouraging with yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing to do. For whatever reason, I meet a lot of human beings in the therapy room, and maybe this is why they're there, that have trouble with that. Mm-hmm. And it's something we frequently have to cultivate. For whatever reason, we seem to try to motivate ourselves with shame and anger, even if we wouldn't do it to another person. Mm. Self-compassion is not letting yourself off the hook if you have a piece in the puzzle, because it's okay to have a piece in the puzzle. It turns out you're human, I'm human, everyone's human, and I am not a perfect pleasure to be with in all my intimate relationships all the time. And I'm sure I'm not alone in all that. I'm sure my husband could talk about it, right? But it's saying I did that. Okay, I'm not going to beat myself up about it, which is a shame spiral and sometimes not taking true accountability, but saying, hey, I did that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't want to do that again, and I'll move forward. So self-compassion isn't, I was mean and snapped at my spouse, but it was okay. I was mean and snapped at my spouse, and it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. But I'm also going to work on that because I don't want to hurt him that way. Mm-hmm. I think it's got to be empathy for myself and empathy for others. Mm-hmm. If the empathy isn't balanced, if all the empathy is for myself, it's really not fair to the people that I'm in relationships with. Mm-hmm. But all the empathy can't be for the other person either while I'm sort of unkind to myself. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought that was a great question. And I think during this process, while people are feeling like a failure and isolated, self-compassion is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. And thanks for all the people who have been here watching this session of Divorce Periscope. Do you have anything else from your notes that you want to touch on? I think
my notes are your questions. I thought your questions were great. I was good.
Thank you. Okay, I think we went through all the questions. Yeah. So do we have any questions or comments still to address, Matt? Okay.
We didn't talk about Blindsided by the Divorce. That's an interesting one. Have you been seeing that one a lot? One spouse being kind of blindsided.
Yeah, I mean, it usually happens that there is the deciding spouse and the reluctant spouse.
The initiator, yeah.
Yeah. So, I tell people when I have consultations, we try and figure out, how did you come to this decision? Who's driving this? Because usually one person is. Yeah. Sometimes it's mutual, but a lot of times one person's driving it and the other is reluctantly going along. And you can't stop a divorce from happening in this country, which is a good thing because people can get out of bad relationships. But when one person decides, it puts the other person in the awkward position of figuring out, how am I going to show up to this? And sometimes it's a total shock and people are totally blindsided by it. So, I don't know if you want to talk about that, feeling like you're pushed into a divorce.
So there's a couple scenarios, and the good thing to know is the research says that the non-initiator is usually fine and happier a couple years later. Like they wind up okay. So when I've met that person, there's a couple scenarios, one of which is therapeutically we figure out that there were signs. And so it's how are you more attuned to signs in your relationship? Maybe their spouse was trying to tell them and they weren't hearing. I'm not faulting them for that, but it's a good skill to have to listen to your spouse. I would presume your spouse is happy when you're listening, right? Mine is. And so sometimes it turns out that the blind side, they're sort of there, and in retrospect, they can see what they missed. Every now and then, somebody was married to a spouse that didn't state their needs and out of nowhere had all these needs. You really can't be responsible for that.
Yeah, right.
And so that's a place for sort of, if there really weren't signs, and every now and then there weren't signs.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of being kind to yourself and ideally making sure that you partner with somebody in the future that states their needs. Research says that the couples that fought more in the beginning frequently did better in the long run because they learned how to work through things. So you want somebody that's a little upset about things at the beginning and tells you. That's a good thing to look for. So either the blindsided person, number one, the blindsided person really statistically generally winds up just fine in the long run. B, they'll either figure out how they were missing signs, or C, they'll partner with somebody that's clear about their needs. So they can be okay in the long run. It's really hard. Tara Brach has a really good story about when golf came to Calcutta, India, and the problem was on the golf course was the monkeys kept coming and taking the balls, moving the balls. And so the golf course tried all these things to get the monkeys off the golf course. And in the end, the resolution was that in Calcutta, the rule is that you play through from wherever the monkey dropped the ball. Right?
That's great.
And the shortcut I kind of use with clients in session is so this is where the monkey dropped the ball. And every now and then your spouse out of nowhere wants to leave, and that is where the monkey dropped the ball. It could be a car accident. That's where the monkey dropped the ball. You could get cancer. Sometimes bad things happen, and we've got to find a way to kind of learn and cope and heal. So that's the best you can do. It's really rough to have a spouse that says they want to leave. That hurts a lot, whether you saw it coming or not.
Well, I like that. It's where the monkey dropped
That's
the
where
ball.
the monkey, it's not my story. Tara Brach says
You can't
it
ignore
beautifully.
it.
You can't ignore it,
right?
You just got to play through.
Yeah.
That's where the monkey dropped the
So
ball.
I think that's a good place to end.
That's where the monkey
That's where the monkey is
dropped the
dropping this ball.
That's where the monkey is
So thanks everyone for watching. And if you're watching this on replay, not live, you can tune in to future broadcasts of Divorce Periscope the first and third Wednesday nights of each month, 7 o'clock. And we talk always about divorce and relationships, ending relationships, some aspect having to do with divorce. So the next session on March 16th, we're going to be talking about children and divorce. So tune in. I'm your host, Matt Pilisher. I'm an attorney mediator at the Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation. We host this broadcast, and we have different guests on each time, so that we have a wealth of professionals that you can learn from. So tonight we had Ruth Feinblum, and we were really happy to have you on.
Thank
was
you
really
so much.
Great,
this was really
great
fun.
show.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll come back again in the future.
Of course.
And thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.